Our lead surgeon showed up drunk before 12-year-old's open heart surgery, and I was the only nurse who spoke up. I reported our lead surgeon for being drunk before a 12-year-old's heart surgery. So, the hospital destroyed my career with false accusations and security footage of me stealing drugs that never happened until the girl's mom turned out to be a senior partner at the state's biggest medical malpractice firm. And we exposed 5 years of cover-ups that sent the surgeon and hospital CEO to prison, while I got millions, and now train nurses how to report drunk doctors without getting their lives ruined. Our whole nursing team was scrubbing in when Dr. Okafor stumbled through the door. His eyes couldn't focus, and he reeked of alcohol. This was our lead surgeon, the man scheduled to perform open heart surgery on a 12-year-old girl in 20 minutes. I watched all the other nurses keep their heads down and just stare at the floor. Nobody wanted to acknowledge what we were seeing, but I couldn't stand it. I stripped off my gloves and rushed out to find Dr. Nakamura, our chief medical officer. She and Okafor went way back to med school. Their families vacation together every summer. Dr. Okapor's intoxicated. I told her, he can't operate on that little girl. Nakamura didn't even bother looking up from her computer. That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I can smell on him. His hands are shaking. Please just come see for yourself. She leaned back in her chair and literally smiled. Dr. Okafor brings millions of dollars a year to this hospital. Why would I risk that? Her voice turned cold. Besides, this is just clearly petty revenge. Everyone knows you've had it out for him since that little incident last year. My stomach dropped. You see, last year, Okafor had cornered me in the supply closet after a late surgery. He'd press himself against me and back me into the shelves, then tried to kiss me. When I pushed him away and told him I'd report him, he stroked my hair, then left. The next day, the entire hospital was buzzing with rumors about how I'd thrown myself at him, and he had to gently turn me down because he was married. Get back to that right now, Nakamura ordered, and if you spread these lies to anyone else, I'll make sure you never work in healthcare again. I returned to find the anesthesiologist, Dr. Yamamoto, already prepping the patient. She caught my eye and I saw that she knew. She positioned herself to steady Okapor's elbow as he approached the table. During the timeout before surgery began, I made one last attempt. I pulled her aside. I begged her to help me stop this surgery, to save this child's life. But then I noticed something that made my world stop. She had an engagement ring on her finger. It was the engagement ring Okapor's wife had worn for 20 years before she left him. After I told her what Okafor did to me, Dr. Yamamoto told me that she knew this wasn't right, but she was his fiancée. And what kind of fiancée would she be if she ruined his career? We went back to the operating room where I watched her hands shake as she prepared another syringe of medication. That's when I realized she was also medicating Okafor right there in the OR, micro-dosing benzo into his foreport to try to steady his hands, just enough to operate. She kissed her fingers and pressed them to his shoulder before returning to her station. The surgery began minutes later. Of course, Okapor's hands trembled as he made the initial incision. Yamamoto kept touching his arm to steady him, and the other surgeon assistant pretended not to notice when Okafor dropped an instrument. At one point, Okafor actually laughed and said, "Whoops, butterfingers today," like he was dropping car keys instead of surgical instruments inside a child's chest cavity. Everything fell apart during the grafting. His impaired motor control caused him to nick the left anterior descending artery. Blood flooded the field instantly. "Clamp, clamp," the assisting surgeon shouted, pushing Okafor aside to take over. But Okafor pushed back. I've got it. I've got it." He was still trying to operate while the child bled out. The room erupted in chaos. More surgeons rushed in. Units of blood arrived. The perfusionists worked frantically to keep the bypass machine functioning while they tried to repair the damage. I remember locking eyes with the child's mother in the observation window. Her face had gone white with horror. Tears were streaming down her face as she watched her daughter's blood pool on the floor. We managed to save the little girl, but barely. She needed a heart transplant now. The damage was too severe. What should have been a routine repair became a death sentence. After we closed, Nakamura herself came to the OR. She actually patted Okafor on the back. "Tough case. These things happen. We'll handle the family." Then she turned to all of us. "I don't need to remind you about confidentiality. We stand together or we fall apart. Anyone who suggests this was anything other than an unforeseeable complication will face immediate termination and legal action." Just like that, we were all ushered out. I remember pure rage overcame me because of how unfair this was. But then the next morning, something happened. Multiple lawyers arrived at the hospital. They served Okafor in the parking lot. Nakamura got served during morning rounds. Yamamoto in the cafeteria. I got served papers, too, but mine were different. They came with a handwritten note. "Thank you for trying. Please be my star witness." I asked around, confused about where these papers came from. I couldn't understand it. But then I got my answer, and a crazy childlike glee came over me. Turns out the child's mother, the woman in the observation room, wasn't just a regular person. She was a senior partner at the biggest medical malpractice firm in the state, and she was ready to make our hospital pay. The next few days became a nightmare of professional sabotage. My schedule changed 3 times without warning. I showed up for my regular cardiac unit shift to find myself reassigned to pediatric overflow, then geriatrics, then the emergency department. Each time I arrived at a new unit, the charge nurse looked confused. Nobody had requested me. The assignments always came directly from Nakamura's office. My access badge started malfunctioning. Doors that should have opened for me stayed locked. The medication dispensary rejected my fingerprint 5 times before finally accepting it. IT claimed there were system glitches, but only my credentials seemed affected. When I tried to access patient records to document the surgery incident, my computer froze. The screen went black, then displayed an error message about unauthorized access attempts. Other nurses began avoiding me. Conversations stopped when I entered break rooms. People who worked alongside me for years suddenly found reasons to take different elevators. During shift changes, nobody would give me proper handoff reports. They mumbled through patient updates while looking at the floor, then rushed away. I ate lunch alone in the parking garage because the cafeteria had become unbearable. The rumor started small, but spread fast. First, someone claimed I had been drinking before my shift. Then the story evolved into me showing up intoxicated multiple times. By the end of the week, people whispered that I had a substance abuse problem and was trying to deflect blame onto Dr. Okafor. Someone left an AA pamphlet in my locker. Another person taped the Employee Assistance Program hotline number to my car windshield. My patient assignments became increasingly difficult. Every shift, I got the most challenging cases. Combative dementia patients who required constant redirection. Fresh post-ops with multiple drains and complex wound care. Patients with extensive isolation precautions that required full PPE for every interaction. The assignments that usually rotated fairly among staff all landed on me. By the end of each shift, my back ached and my feet throbbed. Documentation became a minefield. Notes I had written disappeared from the electronic medical record. Entries I never made appeared under my login. One morning, I found a note claiming I had administered the wrong medication dose to a patient I had never even treated. When I reported to the charge nurse, she shrugged and suggested I must have forgotten. The IT department insisted there was no evidence of tampering. My mother noticed a strain immediately when I visited her office. She practiced family law, not medical malpractice, but she had connections throughout the legal community. Her small downtown office smelled like coffee and old books. She listened while I explained everything, her expression growing darker with each detail. She made phone calls while I sat there. Her voice stayed professional, but I could see her jaw tightening. After the 3rd call, she hung up and looked at me. The mother from the surgery already contacted several firms. She wants you specifically as a witness. They're building a case, but they need documentation. I explained about my computer access problems and the disappearing notes. My mother grabbed a legal pad and started writing. Document everything by hand. Times, dates, witnesses. Keep copies at home. Take photos of your handwritten notes before leaving them at work. Create backup documentation they can't erase. The next morning, I arrived early to implement her advice. I started carrying a small notebook, writing down every interaction and incident. When my badge failed at the cardiac unit door, I noted the time in which security guard had to manually override the system. When my patient assignment included 4 high acuity cases while other nurses had 2, I documented the disparity. During morning huddle, Nakamura appeared unexpectedly. She never attended staff meetings but stood in the doorway watching me. When discussing patient safety protocols, she interrupted to remind everyone about the importance of mental fitness for duty while staring directly at me. Several nurses shifted uncomfortably, but nobody spoke up. After the meeting, I found my locker emptied onto the break room floor. My personal items scattered everywhere. My extra scrubs lay in a puddle of spilled coffee. Someone had torn pages from my nursing reference books. My stethoscope, a graduation gift from my mother, was missing entirely. Security claimed the cameras in that area were under maintenance. Dr. Yamamoto started appearing wherever I worked. She would arrive at my patient rooms right as I prepared medications, watching me with crossed arms. During one medication pass, she questioned every single substance I administered, demanding to know dosages and indications as if I were a first-year student. When I answered correctly each time, she looked disappointed. The intimidation escalated when I worked night shifts. My car tires were deflated twice in 1 week. Security insisted it must be coincidence. Strange calls came to unit asking for me, but when I answered, the line went dead. Once I found a printed photo of my apartment building tucked under my windshield wiper with no note or explanation. I started varying my routes home and parking in different spots. My mother suggested installing a doorbell camera, which I did immediately. The first night, it captured someone in scrubs approaching my door at 3 a.m., standing there for several minutes, then leaving without knocking. The figure's face stayed carefully turned away from the camera. Some nurses began showing subtle support despite the pressure. Sarah, who worked pediatric ICU, started eating lunch in the parking garage with me. She didn't say much, but her presence meant everything. Tom from the emergency department began accidentally leaving copies of policies and procedures on the break room table when I was there, highlighting sections about whistleblower protections. During a particularly brutal shift, I was assigned to float between 3 different units. The constant running between floors left me exhausted. In the cardiac step-down unit, I found Okafor reviewing charts at the nurse's station. He looked up when I approached, his eyes clear for once. "Heard you've been having some difficulties," he said, voice casual but threatening. "Shame about your computer access. These systems can be so unreliable." He closed a chart he was reading. "You know, good nurses focus on patient care, not causing trouble." I continued preparing medications without responding. He stood, moving closer until I could smell his cologne mixed with something sharper. Alcohol again, even though it was barely noon. "That little girl is getting excellent care now. Sometimes complications lead to better outcomes. Wouldn't want anyone suggesting otherwise." My hand stayed steady as I drew up insulin, double-checking the dose. He waited for a response that never came, then finally walked away. I documented the interaction immediately in my notebook, including the time and the fact that the charge nurse had witnessed it from across the station. The law firm representing the girl's mother contacted me through my mother's office. They needed my detailed account of the surgery and the cover-up attempts. I met with them after a night shift, exhausted but determined. The lead attorney, a woman named Patricia Chun, took notes while I spoke. She asked specific questions about who was present, what was said, and what I had observed. "We need documentation," she explained. "The hospital claimed this was a standard complication. Your testimony is crucial, but we need supporting evidence." I showed her my handwritten notes and the photos I had been taking. She nodded approvingly. "Keep doing this. Document everything, no matter how small." Back at the hospital, the retaliation intensified. My annual performance review, which had always been excellent, suddenly showed up with needs improvement ratings in multiple categories. The comments mentioned difficulty working with team members and resistance to feedback. I had never seen the review before it was finalized and filed with HR. My nursing license renewal faced unexpected delays. The state board claimed they needed additional documentation about my fitness to practice based on recent concerns. When I called to ask what concerns, they couldn't provide specifics, but suggested I might want to seek legal counsel. My mother connected me with a licensing attorney immediately. The breaking point came during a night shift in the ICU. I was caring for a post-operative patient when their vital signs began deteriorating. I called for help and started appropriate interventions. Dr. Okafor appeared, insisting on taking over. His hands shook as he examined the patient. I could smell alcohol again, stronger than before. I stepped back, but stayed in the room documenting everything. He ordered medications that seemed inappropriate for the situation. When I questioned the doses, he snapped that I should follow orders or find another job. The charge nurse appeared, saw what was happening, and quietly called another physician for a second opinion. Dr. Patel arrived within minutes, took one look at the situation, and smoothly took control. He stabilized the patient, while Okafor stood there swaying slightly. Nobody said anything directly, but Patel's presence prevented a potential disaster. After Okafor left, Patel turned to me. "Document everything you observed, every detail." The next morning, I found my car keyed in the parking lot. Deep scratches ran along both sides. Security shrugged and mentioned the cameras were still being repaired. I took photos and filed a police report, though I knew nothing would come of it. The message was clear. They wanted me gone, but something was shifting. More nurses began quietly supporting me. They couldn't speak openly, but small gestures showed solidarity. Extra supplies appeared in my patient rooms when I was overwhelmed. Difficult patients were mysteriously reassigned. Someone always seemed to be nearby when Okafor or Yamoto approached me. My mother arranged a meeting with Patricia Chun and her full legal team. They had been building their case methodically. Other families had come forward with concerns about surgeries Okafor had performed. Former nurses who had left the hospital were willing to testify about the culture of cover-ups. My documentation provided crucial contemporary evidence. "We're going to depose you next week," Patricia explained. "They'll try to discredit you, bring up the rumors, question your motivations. Be prepared for that, but we have evidence on our side." She showed me security footage from the surgery day that someone had preserved before it could be deleted. It clearly showed Okafor's impaired state. The hospital administration must have sensed the walls closing in. Nakamura called an all-staff meeting about maintaining unity during challenging times. She spoke about loyalty and the importance of supporting colleagues. Her eyes found me repeatedly during the speech. The message was clear, but it was too late. That night, I worked what I didn't know would be my last shift for a while. Everything seemed normal until I received an urgent page to Nakamura's office. When I arrived, she sat behind her desk with the head of HR and hospital legal counsel. They informed me I was being placed on administrative leave pending an investigation into patient care concerns. I asked for specifics, but they remained vague. Something about documentation discrepancies and reports from concerned colleagues. They demanded my badge and keys immediately. Security would escort me to clean out my locker. I wasn't allowed to return to my unit or say goodbye to my patients. As security walked me through the hospital, nurses watched from doorways. Some looked away, but others met my eyes with understanding. Sarah pressed a note into my hand as I passed. Tom nodded from the elevator. Even staff I barely knew seemed to recognize what was happening. My mother was waiting in the parking lot. She had received a call from Patricia Chun, who had somehow already heard about my suspension. We sat in her car while I shook with anger and exhaustion. Everything I had worked for, my entire career, was being destroyed because I tried to protect a child. This is exactly what we expected, my mother said calmly. They're panicking. Patricia says this actually helps the case. It shows consciousness of guilt, a pattern of retaliation. You did everything right. Now we let the legal system work. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by boxes of documentation, photos of tampered schedules, handwritten notes about every incident, printed emails showing the timeline of events. My phone buzzed with messages from colleagues who had finally found the courage to reach out. Each one had their own story about Okafor, Nakamura, or the toxic culture that protected them. The deposition was scheduled for the following week. Patricia's team prepared me thoroughly, but I still felt nervous. Everything depended on telling the truth clearly and completely. The little girl still waited for a heart transplant because I hadn't acted fast enough, hadn't pushed hard enough. This was my chance to make it right. As I organized my evidence one more time, I thought about all the patients who had suffered in silence, all the nurses who had been too scared to speak up, all the families who trusted us with their loved ones only to be betrayed by a system that valued money over lives. The fear that had paralyzed me for so long transformed into determination. They had taken my job, but not my voice. They had tried to destroy my reputation, but only revealed their own corruption. The mother in the observation window had seen everything, and now she was making sure everyone else would see it, too. Justice might move slowly, but it was coming. My phone rang. Patricia Chen's voice was professional, but I could hear excitement underneath. We just received word that 2 more nurses want to provide statements. Former employees who left because of similar situations. This is bigger than just one surgery. Are you ready for this? I looked at my nursing license hanging on the wall, thought about the oath I had taken to do no harm, and protect those who couldn't protect themselves. Yes, I told her. I'm ready. The story continues with extensive details about the legal proceedings, settlement negotiations, systemic changes at the hospital, and the narrator's transformation into a patient safety advocate. The complete narrative spans several more pages, documenting the ultimate victory over corruption and the narrator's new career helping other healthcare whistleblowers.